Look, the fall wasn't supposed to have a witness. That's what he counted on. That's what the man in the perfectly pressed navy suit, standing at the rooftop door with his hand still on the frame, had calculated down to the last detail. The height, the angle, the time of night, the one corner of the building where the security camera had been offline for 11 days, a maintenance request he had personally delayed. He'd thought of everything. Everything except the window on the 9th floor. Everything except the man inside it who couldn't sleep. She was 9 months pregnant. 9 months. Zara Kwan, who had put on her husband's oversized cardigan that night because it still smelled like the man she thought she knew, stood at the rooftop ledge in her socks. Her thick natural hair loose around her face. Her belly, their son, heavy and close. She hadn't come up here to stand at the edge. She'd come up because she couldn't breathe inside. Because the walls of their apartment had been pressing in for weeks and she hadn't known why until 3 days ago, and since then she hadn't been able to sleep, hadn't been able to eat, had been moving through their home like a woman trying not to disturb the surface of still water. She didn't know he'd followed her up. She didn't feel his hands until they were already on her back. It happened in 2 seconds. The push wasn't violent, that's the thing that haunts me most about it, it wasn't a shove born from rage. It was deliberate and measured. The same hands that had pressed against her lower back every night for 3 years, guiding her through crowds, keeping her close, those same hands made a calculation and pushed. She didn't scream. The air took her voice. The city opened up below her, 10 stories of dark air, and Zara Kwan fell with both hands instinctively wrapping around her belly, around her son, even now, even in this. And then, from the 9th floor window, a figure came out. Not through a door. Through the window. Down the exterior service ladder that ran the northeast face of the building, the one that maintenance used, the one that most residents didn't know existed. Park Tae-yang had lived in apartment 9C for 14 months and he knew every inch of this building the way he knew every inch of every building he'd ever been assigned to. He'd been watching the rooftop from his window for an hour. He'd seen Hyun-jun follow her up. He'd been moving before the push. He caught her at the 8th floor. Not cleanly. Not like the movies. His arm hooked around hers and the force of it nearly took them both off the ladder, and it was 30 seconds of pure controlled terror, his feet braced against the rungs, her weight against his side, her breath coming in these short sharp gasps that told him she was conscious, she was present, she was still here. "I've got you, don't move. I've got you." She didn't move. They hung there on the side of a 10-story building in the middle of the night, the city completely indifferent below them, and Tae-young held on. 3 floors above, the rooftop door clicked shut. Lee Hyun-jun straightened his jacket, rode the elevator back down to their floor, and got into bed. He lay on his back in the dark. Looked at the ceiling. And waited for his phone to tell him it was done. It never did. That should tell you everything you need to know about this man he really was. But to understand how Zara Kwan ended up on that rooftop, you have to go back. You have to understand what she built, what she found, and what it cost her to keep quiet long enough to make it count. 6 months earlier, Zara Kwan had a life that looked, from the outside, like something that had been carefully chosen. Not inherited, not lucky, and chosen. She'd worked for everything in it. A senior researcher at a private policy institute, a work that required equal parts patience and precision, the ability to sit with incomplete information longer than was comfortable and wait for the pattern to emerge. She was good at waiting. She was good at patterns. She'd met Lee Hyun-jun at a conference. He was magnetic in a way of men who are used to being the most capable person in any room. Attentive and funny in a dry way that felt like a gift when he turned it toward you. He'd asked for her card and then actually used it the next day, which she'd noted, she always noticed follow-through. They'd been together 2 years before he proposed. 3 years total before the night on the rooftop. He was good at being a husband. Tender in a ways that mattered. He cooked on Sundays. He read her research drafts and asked real questions. When they found out she was pregnant, he'd sat on the bathroom floor with her, both of them leaning against the tub, and he'd said, "We're going to be so good at this," with a conviction that she had felt in her chest. She believed him. She believed all of it. The crack appeared on a Wednesday afternoon in her 7th month. She'd been home, working from the couch, feet up, her laptop balanced on a pillow because her belly had taken over most of her lap. Hyun-jun was at work. She was pulling together a citation and couldn't find the reference document she needed, thought she might have saved it to the shared home drive by accident. She opened it. Started searching. The folder she found wasn't labeled. Just a string of numbers, a naming convention you use when you don't want something to be found by anyone who doesn't already know what they're looking for. She almost moved past it. Muscle memory, researcher's instinct, she opened it. Financial records. She wasn't a forensic accountant, but she understood structure, and this structure was wrong in ways she could feel before she could name. Layered transfers, holding entities, accounts in jurisdictions that existed specifically to make money hard to follow. She went slowly. She took her time. Outside, the city moved, the afternoon light shifted, and Zara sat on the couch with her hand resting on her belly and went through it all the way to the end. There were names. People she'd met. People who had sat at her dinner table, who had brought wine, who had asked about her research with what she had believed was genuine interest. Those names, in these documents, marked with notations that turned her stomach. She understood enough to know what she was looking at. She'd written policy papers on networks exactly like this. She'd just never expected to be living inside one. And then a subfolder. Inside, a name. Kim Soo-ah. She opened it. A woman. Early 30s. Elegant in her photos in a way of someone who has never had to try hard to be. And the photos were not professional. They were the photos of a man who kept documentation of something he considered his. Restaurants Zara recognized. A hotel she had stayed in with Hyun-jun, their 2nd anniversary. She remembered the room, the view, the breakfast they'd had in bed. That same hotel lobby. Soo-ah, waiting. Hyun-jun, arriving. Zara looked at those photos for a mean time. Then she kept going. Because she already knew the worst part hadn't come yet. The last document in the folder had her name at the top. Zara Kwon. Risk assessment. She was a researcher. She read it the way she read everything. Fully. Without skipping. Subject's professional background in policy analysis creates significant exposure risk. Subject demonstrates high capacity for pattern recognition and source triangulation. Access to institutional networks compounds risk if subject becomes suspicious. Emotional proximity previously managed. Delivery window creates timeline constraint. Recommend permanent resolution before term. Permanent resolution. She put the laptop down on the cushion beside her. Put both hands on her belly. Her son moved under her palms, a slow roll, an elbow or a knee, some part of him pushing back against the world. She sat with it. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She didn't move either. Then she picked the laptop back up, closed the folder exactly as she'd found it, and went back to her citations. Because Zara Kwon was a researcher. And she understood, in a way that was now horribly clarified, that what you do with information determines everything. You don't reveal what you know. Not until you know all of it. Not until you can do something with it that cannot be undone. She spent for weeks building the file. She was careful in the way her work had trained her to be, methodical, patient, invisible in her process. She had contacts. Years of policy work meant she knew people in oversight, in regulatory bodies, in the corridors where this information could be received and acted upon without warning. She made calls that looked, on the surface, like professional follow-ups. She sent documents through channels that looked like research requests. She built it layer by layer. Quietly. While Hyun-jun brought her tea in the evenings and asked how she was feeling and pressed his hand to her belly and said not long now. Not long now. She also found Tae-young's name. Not directly. She found a reference in Hyun-jun's files to a surveillance concern, an unknown variable in the building, someone Hyun-jun had flagged and couldn't fully identify. She'd searched the name that appeared in a partial record and come up with very little, which told her more than a full profile would have. People with very little public record in very specific circumstances were usually one of two things. She'd made a judgment call and left a note in a courier envelope in the 9th floor mail slot. No name. Just a document reference and a question. He'd slid a response under her door the next morning. One line. I know. I'm here. Don't run yet. She didn't run. She kept building. She kept being his wife. She kept sitting across from Hyun-jun at their dinner table and asking about his day and listening to his answers with the same attentive expression she'd always had, and he never saw it. Not once. Because he had decided, long ago, what Zara was, a woman who loved him, who trusted him completely, who would never think to look. He was wrong about her from the very beginning. The night she went to the roof, she already knew about the timeline. She'd found the notation in a new document 3 days earlier. A date. Her due date, circled, with a single word beside it. Before. She understood what that meant. She had already transmitted the full evidence package to 3 separate contacts. She had already done everything she needed to do. She'd gone to the roof because she needed air. Because the weight of knowing, the weight of performing not knowing, had been sitting on her chest for weeks, and her sun was pressing down and her back was aching and she just needed to stand somewhere open for 5 minutes and breathe. She hadn't known he'd follow her. She hadn't known it would be that night. But Taeyang had known. He'd been watching the rooftop camera feed on his laptop. He'd seen Hyun-jun check his phone, stand up, follow her to the elevator with a deliberate stillness of a man executing a decision. He'd been at his window before the elevator reached the top floor. On the side of that building, 9 floors up, holding on. Taeyang got them to the 7th floor landing before his arms gave out enough to stop. Fire escape platform, just wide enough. He got her onto it and they both sat with their backs against the brick, breathing. Zara had both hands on her belly. Her eyes were closed. He pushed me, she said. Not a question. Yes. A long pause. The city below, indifferent, beautiful, continuing. The package went through, 3 copies, 2 federal contacts and 1 journalist who won't sit on it. I did it this morning, I knew about the timeline. I wasn't going to leave without making sure it was done. She opened her eyes and looked at him directly. You're the surveillance variable he couldn't identify. Yes. You've been building the financial case from the outside. 18 months. We were working the same case from opposite ends. Looks like it. He's okay, he keeps moving. He's okay. Taeyang didn't say anything. He stayed where he was. Present. Solid. Like something she could lean against if she needed to, without making it a thing. Eventually she leaned against it. They took Hyun-jun at 6 a.m. He answered the door in a robe, completely composed, the expression of a man who had decided that composure was the only remaining asset available to him. He asked for his attorney. He looked at the lead investigator with an assessing gaze of someone calculating how much they knew. They put Zara's evidence package on the table. Your wife built this, 9 months pregnant. For weeks. 3 separate transmission channels. She also flagged the rooftop camera outage in the documentation. Submitted it as evidence of premeditation before it happened. Hyun-jun looked at the package. Something moved across his face. It wasn't guilt, not quite. It was something older and more honest than that. It was the expression of a man who has spent years believing he was the smartest person in every room, confronting the fact that he had been wrong about one room, one person, for the entire duration. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Kim Soo-ah was 3 time zones away when her accounts froze. She had resources, contingencies, the infrastructure of someone who had always known this day might come. She was good. She'd been good for a long time. But the freeze was automatic, triggered by Zara's legal authorization, and Soo-ah's financial structure ran through Hyun-jun's network because she had built it that way, years ago, because she had been certain the woman whose name anchored the underlying accounts would never understand what she was looking at. She had been wrong about that. They found her at an international terminal. Impeccable, still, already distant behind her eyes. A woman who had decided, at some point, that getting caught was just a problem to be solved later. The agent who made the arrest said she looked almost curious. Like she was already thinking 3 moves ahead to a board that no longer existed. The evidence package Zara had built was thorough enough that there were no more moves. 3 months later. Morning light coming through windows she had chosen herself, in an apartment she had chosen herself, in a neighborhood that was quiet in a way of places where ordinary things happen ordinarily. Zara was on the small balcony. Her locks down. A mug in both hands. Her son was asleep inside, 10 weeks old, with his father's jawline and her eyes and a personality that was already making itself known with spectacular clarity. She had not named him after anyone she needed to let go. She had sat with names for a week and come back to the same one every time, a name that was just his, clean, unhaunted, starting from now. The balcony door opened. Taeyang came out with 2 mugs, set one on the railing, took the other chair. He'd been staying in the second room, practically, in the loose way of things that hadn't been formally decided yet but had simply become true. His posture was different these days. Less held. Like a man who had finished being on assignment and hadn't realized, until it was over, how long he'd been carrying the tension of it. Saturday. The light moved. He slept 5 hours. I know. I checked the monitor at 3. You have to stop checking the monitor at 3. Probably. She looked at the street below. A woman walking a dog. A delivery bike. The completely ordinary texture of a day beginning. I keep thinking about the rooftop, she said. Not with distress. With a tone of someone who is no longer afraid of a thing but still turning it over. Not the fall. The part after. The part where I knew I was going to be okay. I knew before we reached the landing. I don't know how, but I knew. Taeyang was quiet for a moment. I knew on the ladder when you stopped moving exactly right. You went still at the right moment. Most people don't do that. You knew how to be caught. She considered that for a long time. I spent for weeks trusting a stranger I'd never met, based on one line slipped under my door. It was a good line. It was one sentence. Sometimes that's enough. She almost smiled. Let it settle into something quieter instead. Put her hand over his on the armrest. He turned his palm up and held on. No speech. No declaration. Just the morning and the street below and somewhere inside, a boy sleeping through the whole beginning of his life. Here's what I want you to take with you. Zara didn't survive because she got rescued. She survived because she had already done the work before the fall. Because when a woman who has spent her career learning to sit with incomplete information and wait for the pattern to emerge finds the pattern in her own home, she doesn't collapse. She gets quiet. She gets methodical. She gets dangerous in a way of someone who has nothing left to protect except the truth and a child and herself. He thought he was dealing with a woman who loved him too much to see clearly. He was dealing with the most precise mind in the operation. He just never checked. They never check. The person who survives isn't the one who never gets pushed. It's the one who makes sure the work is already done before she reaches the edge. So when the fall comes, it can't take anything with it that matters. If this story found you, if you were with Zara from that rooftop all the way to that morning balcony, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments who you trusted less from the beginning. Hyunjin? Or Suar? Because I have a feeling that conversation is going to run, son. See you in the next one.